Things in Formula One are gearing up to get interesting in the coming years. There are rumors that Porsche and their parent company Volkswagen have been paying close attention to the scene and are revving up to make an appearance in Formula One. Porsche is one of the better-known car brands off the racetrack, and for many years, people have wondered why they don't have their own F1 car. Well, you're going to find out why in this video. But before we take a look at Porsche's involvement in Formula One, it's worth noting that the company's participation and success in other motorsports is something to be noted. They originally became active in vehicle racing in the 50s and 60s, but it was a gradual start with little to show for it. They raced in specific versions of their road cars for many years, but they never designed any purpose-built race vehicles. History of Porsche in Formula One. Given Porsche's strong heritage in motorsport, it's understandable to wonder why the company does not have an F1 team, especially given that F1 is currently the most lucrative motorsport. However, Porsche competed in Formula One many years ago, fielding a team that won a race. Porsche has previously designed cars for the likes of Mercedes in Grand Prix racing in the 1920s and 30s. After fielding a two-seater car in the Formula 2 Championship, they entered F1 for the first time in 1961. However, their time as a constructor in F1 was pretty brief. Their single championship race victory came in the 1962 French Grand Prix, where they also won non-championship races and afterwards sold their cars to privateers. They returned to Formula One in 1983, but solely as an engine manufacturer this time. This makes sense because Porsche had grown to be one of the world's largest and best automakers, and it was only natural that their motorsport prowess would be used in F1 in some way. This time around, they were significantly more successful than the previous, as they were able to help manufacture and win 2 constructor championships, and helped 3 drivers in winning the Drivers' Championship. Between 1984 and 87, Porsche-powered cars won 25 races, with 2 of the sport's greatest names, Alain Prost and Niki Lauda, winning with Porsche engines. Despite their success, the engines were known to be less powerful than those of their competitors. Honda and BMW were able to extract more power from their engines, giving them a significant advantage throughout qualifying. Even though Porsche had a lot of pole positions, their engine lacked in the turbo power, which was used to keep their drivers satisfied, and their success was hampered by hefty costs. Third attempt. Porsche returned to F1 for the 3rd time in 1991. Their engines failed to score a single point for the Footwork Arrows team, which was even worse than their initial stint. Back in the 80s, Porsche was hesitant to put their name on the engines in case they failed spectacularly, but this time their failure meant everyone knew who was to blame, and they have not competed in Formula One since. Regulations changed and engines evolved after Porsche's success in the 80s, and the drivers who used Porsche engines demanded a separate qualifying engine. The journey to qualification requires drivers to push their cars much harder than they do during the race. Thus, having greater power in the engine during this phase is critical for securing the best starting position on race day. Due to the exorbitant costs, Porsche declined. Furthermore, they were adamant that their engine could still compete, which it did for several races. Is Porsche fully committed to Formula One? Formula One is a very expensive sport. Teams now spend hundreds of millions of dollars each year developing new cars in the modern era. This necessitates a significant initial expenditure, and the teams must be completely dedicated to their F1 operations. For the likes of Williams, which is mostly entirely focused on Formula One, it makes sense to spend as much as possible to achieve the best outcomes. Mercedes, on the other hand, has been the dominant force in the sport since 2014. They spend over $500 million a year on their vehicles, but their success has propelled them right to the top of the motorsport world. Over the previous decade, their advertising value has risen from millions to billions, indicating a strong return on investment for one of the world's largest automakers. Porsche, which was clearly not ready to invest such a large amount, as Formula One has not been a #1 priority for them in the past. What to expect from Porsche? The owners of Porsche, which is the Volkswagen Group, has been having meetings with the FIA and present F1 manufacturers in recent times to discuss their potential re-entry. This could be as far as 2026, when they expect the new engine rules to kick off. Discussions are still being held, and a strong issue has been raised about the potential advantages a new manufacturer in the F1 could actually have, given that they need to make sure they do not falter against their rivals who have much more experience. For many years, the automaker has considered a Formula One involvement, and they've had an engine project underway for 2021, which would have converted their current engine to one capable of Grand Prix racing. Their hopes were dashed when F1 ditched the idea of a shakeup to the engine rules. The vice president of Porsche Motorsport, Thomas Laudenbach, has been heavily involved in the decision-making process at the meetings. He said that the factors they need to meet for the next generation of power unit regulations are falling into place. This would allow Porsche to be able to commit to the championship. Porsche has pushed for an increase in the electrified element of the vehicles, saying that it's important that F1 makes a shift towards electrification if the company wants to sell their share of electric vehicles in the future. A higher priority is being placed on the electric part of the powertrain, which Laudenbach claims is very important. He also pressed for the need for Formula One to follow through on its measure to reduce spending, even beyond the cost cap they initially introduced recently. This would increase the likelihood of Porsche committing to the F1. It is no secret that Porsche is seriously considering Formula One, and although they are in serious talks with the FIA, there's been no official decision yet. We certainly look forward to the excitement of having Porsche in the Formula One. Well, as you can see, Porsche is really serious about joining Formula One. Do you think it will happen? Well, you better let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, check out this one about safety cars in F1. Thank you for watching, and stay safe.